order.
Excellent.
And we need a roll call.
Well, I show Bachhuber, Giebert, Cook, West, and Sullivan present, Potter and Knorr not.
Okay,
If they join us, I will record the time at which they join us to the best of my
Okay.
ability.
so Mark is here.
Yes,
Good.
he is.
Okay,
He's
and
talking about me.
yes, I know. I will explain why I wasn't there at the last meeting. I was at my grandson's wedding. So,
No, you
That's-
mean your son's wedding?
no, my grandson's.
That's impossible.
No, it's not.
But when he got married,
Oh,
is he 12
grandson.
years old or what?
Right.
No,
Always
he
the charmer,
is-
Jim. Always the charmer.
Yeah, he's 27.
Oh, man. All right.
Okay, Mark can vouch for my age. My former husband taught him English in college,
Oh, boy.
and I'm 3 weeks older than my former husband.
All right.
We're digressing.
Let's go to business.
We are.
Yes. First item on the agenda is the minutes from last time.
I'll move to approve those minutes. That's Jim Cook.
Thank you.
Okay,
And
do we have a second?
Paco Bar will second.
Okay, any changes, additions, errors, whatever? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And I'm going to abstain since I really wasn't present, even though I did log in for a short time. Okay, next item is the Graber Pond elevation control redesign. And Eric or Rich, which one of you want to explain this?
I can go ahead. So at the last Water Resources Management Commission meeting, there was sort of a summary of a lot of activity that had been going on at the city level and at the stakeholder level, including folks from the Pheasant Branch Creek. And in and amongst the discussions that came about, there was some sort of historic look back on the condition of Graber Pond specific to the overflow elevation. And it had been discovered some time ago, but sort of kind of came to light as an important document, this 1994 survey by Ayers that the city had actually commissioned, which was specifically referred to as the Graber Pond and Outflow Survey. As part of that survey, they identified what we've sort of been referring to as this farmer's berm at elevation 904. And so the discussion between the city, between the stakeholders, and to a certain degree between the regulators has kind of focused on, all right, what's going to be the frequency of overflow and how is that going to affect downstream properties with regards to, volumes and flow rates and erosion and in some instances, the transmission of potentially invasive species of vegetation. Sort of long story short, the commission has decided that this historic elevation of 904 is what should be reflected in the plans, and then has directed MSA to adjust our plans to change the elevation to that control point, and then to eliminate certain components of the design that previously had been put in place to bypass discharges around the downstream Misty Valley stormwater management pond system. So in many, many ways, what we're proposing to do as part of this amendment is really quite simplifying the project. Unfortunately, we still do not yet have clear direction from the DNR as to exactly precisely how they want to permit this. And in fact, Jeff Felland of our office just last week was still having conversations with the DNR, and they're talking about now having a meeting outside at the project site with some degree of survey equipment to make some observations as to what do they think the normal water level is, wetland boundaries, and how things might be affected from the outlet. It's our suspicion, as a result of the tone of these conversations, that we're going to need to get an individual permit for constructing the pond outlet. But things like wetland permitting and stuff actually may become a little bit simpler. So it's a little bit from both columns. Part of it's getting more complicated in terms of permitting. The design is getting simpler in terms of its complexity, and some of the permitting is getting simpler because since the outlet is going to be higher, there'll be less need to impact wetlands and do grading around the outlet and things like that. So the long story short, we are pretty clear on what we need to do for design. We're not entirely clear on what we need to do yet for permitting, but we're hoping that after this meeting next week, it will become clear, and then we can go right into the bidding. So the tasks we've itemized in this contract amendment request are for final design, for permitting, for attending meetings like the one we're attending here tonight, and then to put it out for bid. At which point, when the city selects a bidder, I guess it'll be up to the city how they want to handle construction services. That would not be part of what we're talking about tonight. Our total request for the board is $15,400.
Okay, are there any questions?
I have a question. So
Yeah,
if I am seeing this, well, in my simplistic thinking here, what this tells me is that you're going to raise the water level up 2 feet.
From
that
what it
gonna-
was, from what it was previously proposed to be. Right now, the overflow elevation is about 905.1.
So it's, well, okay. So let's step back. What was the level that was in the pond a month or 2 months after the 18 flood? I just seem to remember that it was very high. So what was that? Do you know? Does anybody know?
I don't know that anybody's captured that, Mark. I mean,
And Mark, that probably does not reflect whatever constructed levee, berm, call it what you want, was out there. It was inundated beyond that level. So it's what was there. Let's just pick a number 2 months after this April 2018 storm. I'm just going to say this, and I'm open to discussion. Would have probably been the same had this project gone forward or not gone forward because of the amount of rain that we had. And I'm open to comment from Eric Thompson or Eric Sorensen or anybody else who's might weigh in on this.
My recollection is it was up around that same overtopping elevation for many months, and
Yeah.
honestly,
So-
it looks completely different this year. It's very dry, and a lot more of the outlet features are exposed currently, Mark.
Right.
The concern here is that if we set this outflow at 904, and again, I don't know what the level was 2 or 3 months after the flood. I just recall it that many of the other features that we had put into the pond, like the trails around it, and I believe even the dock that was out there, were underwater.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that 904 is low enough that these other structures are not constantly underwater.
I think Gary said the walkway was like 905. And the 904 came from a master plan back in 2004, I believe.
Right, but if we've had a
The
long period of low water,
Water resources that IPI and the elevation in the master plan said 904.
my point is that if we experience a long period of low water and we were stupid enough to put in other structures that wouldn't take into account that 904 target, are we going to now have to redo, for example, the trail system through there? Because it's not high enough above the 904 level.
I
Right.
think that's a possibility, Mark.
Well, the elevation of 904 will keep it below the pond, below the walkway, except during maybe large events like 2018, where for a period of time might be inundated. But the will back down 904.
Nothing we're proposing at this point in time would have prevented the inundation that occurred, in my opinion, in the April rain. That walkway would have been underwater just like it was before. And we're not, but at the proposed elevation, the walkway should stay dry as long, again, it all depends on how big a rain we get. We're not designing it for the August 2018 storm.
Well, okay.
Yeah, my question, Eric Thompson, just based on what your discussion with DNR, is there a chance they're going to come back and not agree with the 904 number and want to go with something else because of wetland issues or whatever?
I don't think it's going to be an issue of wetland issues. I honestly don't know that the DNR has really truly thought this through to like, all right, here is what's being proposed and here is our permit action to allow what's being proposed to be built. My instinct says that, you know, they've become aware of all of the discussion and all the consideration that's going on here, and they've sort of retreated from the project a little bit to say, all right, let's see what your final proposal is going to be, and then we'll talk about it. And in light of, you know, all of the public involvement that's been sort of going on in recent history, I think they're leaning towards this individual permit for purposes of being able to bring in the public comment period to it. So I don't necessarily know that, you know, there's going to be a critical wetland issue or a critical stormwater management issue or really any critical technical issue. I think they just want to make sure that they're, you know, making sure they're getting opinions from all those who may be impacted by the project.
Yeah.
But that's just, you know, me kind of on the sidelines at this point. We'll know more, of course, when we're in the field with them next week or whenever we get that scheduled.
And city staff will be with you guys?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, and again, you know, we've all modified our approach here based on input mainly from the Friends group and the concerns about downstream impacts, which is a good thing, I would suggest. So I think what we're proposing now is in keeping with the best combination of downstream, minimizing downstream concerns and the capability of that pond itself right now.
So at one point, we were talking about putting a pump in here. Is that no longer on the table? To keep the water level pretty consistent?
That is no, right now, that's not in the project. And the reason for that was the concerns expressed about pumping during dry times, exacerbating downstream non-native distribution of plants in an area that's been undergoing restoration work with DNR funds to try and restore native plants. And we don't want to try and backtrack on what the work that's been going on at Pheasant Branch itself.
Okay, I'll bite on that. Why would we pump in dry weather or in dry conditions? Right, that intuitively that sounds incongruous, right? How would you have water to pump in dry situations? Right, if you're pumping to a specific level in the pond, you're experiencing dry conditions, why would you be pumping?
I can,
Go ahead.
The pumping alternative was also much more expensive, Mark.
Different, but okay.
But to answer the question, a lot of times the reason you pump would be to develop some capability of holding back that water so that when you do get the big rain, it's not a problem. This is done all the time, just sort of in a reverse manner. for dam management. A lot of times, in the fall, they'll draw the dams down so that when they get the spring snow melt, they can close the dams and then have this extra storage for when the water comes off the watershed and they can hold it back. In this instance, you might pump the pond down in anticipation of a big rain so that when you get that runoff, the pond doesn't fill up to a level that would cause damage. That's all kind of off the table because we're not really considering a pump for this alternative. I did want to provide one more piece of information. While we were all talking, I pulled up a topo map of Graber Pond, and I got an aerial photo actually from 2020. I don't know the date of the photo, but it shows the water in the pond rather high. In fact, it shows the boardwalk underwater barely. And the water surface in this aerial photo is just about elevation 904 based upon a contour that kind of parallels the boundary. And with the boardwalk being just underwater, it would suggest that the low spot in the boardwalk is a little bit below the 904 elevation, that we're talking about putting this pond outlet in. Now, again, the commission is, just like Jim said, trying to balance a whole bunch of things. Flood control is obviously one of them, but the natural environment of the Kettle Pond is one, and the issues with non-native vegetation transportation is another. And so since 904 was a historic elevation that's been documented, I think it was an easy bottom line to gravitate to, like, let's just restore it to where it historically was. And maybe it's not the greatest solution, but it's at least what it's been.
Okay, Eric, that 904, so the current boardwalk will be a little bit below water.
If the water were to get that high, right?
If the water were to get that high.
This being a kettle pond, is supposed to have water level fluctuations, and it's supposed to get occasionally dry, but with weather patterns and climate change and development, maybe that's been upset a little bit.
Yeah, I guess my concern right now is also looking at it in terms of what the city has done, and this is independent of water resources, but it's a conservancy lands issue in terms of the development that they've put in that area and to provide trails in the boardwalk for citizens. So will we need to redo all of that to make it usable?
I think the answer is yes or no, depending on the water level, right? That's the question, is that, well, is this conservancy or is this parks, the trail system and the dock, right?
It's conservancy.
So what needs to happen is that so I'll make the motion to refer this issue to conservancy for them to figure out if they need to make adjustments to that trail system based on the proposed elevation.
Conservancy Lands did the master plan back in 2004, and they're the ones that recommended a 904.
But that was 2004.
It was done by Conservancy Lands.
Yeah, but
2004 is 17 years ago, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
That may be true, but they put those trails in 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there. And they probably weren't looking at that document. This is something that Penny Klein slapped in there. And I'm sure that she didn't look at that proposed elevation. So the reality is that at 204, those trails are going to be underwater. Whether that happens or not, I mean, that's a matter of chance. But Conservancy needs to understand that at 204, that trail system's at risk.
Yeah. And they haven't even considered this issue.
It's just a referral. We don't need to act on it. Conservancy Lands does.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Conservancy Lands needs to be made aware of this.
Well, that's why I made the motion.
I know. And I will second it.
Conservancy Land is on our committee, the Water Resources.
Yeah, but the person on Water Resources is a Water Resources member that goes to Conservancy Lands.
No, it's a Conservancy Lands member that's on Water Resources.
No, there isn't a Conservancy Lands member on Water Resources. It goes the other way.
regardless, obviously it
Okay.
hasn't come up yet, so
No.
this is a chance for it to come up.
So what's the motion?
To refer this to Conservancy Lands for them to take action if necessary.
Are we referring this amendment that we're discussing or just the proposed
The
elevation?
proposed elevation.
All right, we're not asking for them to comment on the amendment.
No.
All right.
No.
All right.
And Conservancy Lands meets next Wednesday.
So I want to put this out there just so, we're understanding the consultant client relationship. It does look like we've got a meeting scheduled with the DNR next week. It's tentatively scheduled for next week, but Al Ramager at the DNR has indicated that they could have time possibly the following week. I'm sure that the discussion that we have with them in the field is going to be controlled. It's going to be dictated in a way by the proposed elevation of the outlet structure. So if the thought is that this referral to Conservancy Lands may result in a different elevation of the overflow, that could have ramifications on our discussions with the DNR and their willingness to kind of move this project forward with a common understanding.
I'm suggesting that CLC needs to understand that the elevation is going to be at 904 and to take the appropriate action to make their trail system work with that.
Okay, very good. Then I'm not worried about getting derailed with the DNR discussion.
Right.
Right.
I mean, my request to Richard or Eric Sorensen would be, can somebody just take a few shots on that boardwalk and let's get that question answered? The information Eric Thompson provided is one level of precision, but it'd be nice to know 904 is or is not higher than the lowest point in the boardwalk. I would think CLC would want to know that.
Well, Gary said it was 905, but I don't.
Well,
I don't think that's correct. I mean, when MSA did survey for the project in 2018, part of the boardwalk was submerged, but I cannot tell you from memory, what that last shot was we got, which would also tell you what the water surface was at that point, Mark. But I'm going to guess that 904 will cause some issues and temporary inundation of a part of that boardwalk that heads south towards Graber Road.
Okay, so let me, I don't think we need to overanalyze this. We're telling CLC that they need to fix their problem.
yeah.
I think the other issue is we need to move forward with this project. So
Mhm.
let's talk about getting this done.
Okay.
So Mark, just so I understand, your motion is to say we are going to refer it to Conservancy Lands, but we are establishing tonight that 904, based on MSA's information here, that we accept 904 as the
Criteria.
proposed elevation. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, so, okay, there's two steps here and we've only tackled the first. All I'm asking for is a referral to CLC so that they can take care of the 904 issue with their trail system. Stop, end of story. The next motion will be to accept the proposal as presented here so that MSA can move forward with the recommendations from Water Resources to make the thing 904. So I'll make that motion as well.
But we already have a motion we need to vote on.
Yep. You're getting ahead of yourself a little bit on that.
Yeah. So can we vote on the first motion?
Trying to multitask here.
All the question.
So all in favor of the motion to basically refer this to CLC for informational purposes so they know what's happening?
Yeah,
Is that stating it correctly?
as long as refer does not become looking for their agreement to it. We're not asking that. We're just informing them of what this is
Yes,
going
that
to
is
be.
correct.
Okay, that was my concern. Yep.
It seems to me that the Water Resources last meeting established the 904 elevation. So that's not really coming from this committee, but I think you can forward that information through this committee.
That's a good point, Richard.
I'll draft up a memo.
Yeah. We want
can we-
CLC to be aware of these issues.
Can we just revise the word refer, make it inform,
Okay,
if that's a friendly amendment?
Sure.
yeah, I have no problem with it. So the motion is to inform CLC of the 904 elevation.
You have a second on that?
I
Who's the
seconded
second?
It's
it.
the same pair, right?
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion on it? Then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. And then who wants to make the next motion?
I think Mark already did.
Yeah.
And we need a second.
I'll second that.
Okay,
Just so Mark's motion is to approve the amendment as presented. Is that right?
that's correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Who seconded that? I'm sorry. I was
Warren.
jotting notes.
The second one, Warren,
Okay, thank you.
And the funding is going to come from stormwater utility then.
It's my understanding.
yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that too.
Okay, Mark, do you want
At
to talk
another
about
time.
that?
Pardon me?
Do you want to talk about that tonight or another time?
No, another time.
Okay,
If possible, I'd like to be involved in that. I'd like to understand better the inner workings of SWAB or the utility
Me too.
and the
we're
funding.
going to talk about that tomorrow morning, Rich.
Perfect.
And just remember, you're getting Susan's opinion, not my opinion.
And that was my point. But
You line us all up, Rich, you'll get 6 different answers. So pick what you like.
Yes,
well, at least I won't be wrong then. I'll just blend them all together.
right. A lot of the opinion varies or revolves around whether something is maintenance or new construction.
I hate to interrupt, but I don't think we can talk about this right now.
That is true.
All right.
So I think we can adjourn.
Is that a motion?
We need a motion, or I can just say we're adjourned.
You want to declare it? I can write
I
that
will
down.
declare
too.
we're adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Okay. Good night.
night.
I need-
Thank you.
Do I need to relog on for water resources?
There is no
What if
water
there was a
resource.
There's no
meeting.
water resources. tonight.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Thanks, guys.